Hi, I'm Dr. Koyal Verma, and today we are going to discuss language, media and popular culture. Let us look at the learning outcomes for the module. Number 1, to understand the relationship between language and culture. Number 2, to understand how language and media can shape popular culture. Number 3, to understand the structures of language and social change through media. So let us start with the introduction. There is an important connection between media, language and culture. More recently, understanding media and language to study popular culture has raised a lot of interest by scholars from different disciplines such as sociology, anthropology, philosophy, cultural studies, global studies and media studies due to the rise of social media and popular culture. Globalization has also played an important role in bringing cultural change. There is no doubt that social media has started to shape language and culture that is expressed through vocabulary often used by social media users to describe their experiences on networking platforms and websites through images and words which together form the basis of language. However, this raises an important question that is, does language shape culture or is culture shaped by language? To understand this question more deeply, it is important to understand the connection between the two. In this connection, a very famous cultural theorist, Stuart Hall, argues that culture is about shared meanings. Language is the medium in which we make sense of things, in which meaning is produced and exchanged. Further, he argues that culture in a modern sense can also be defined to refer to popular art, literature, music, design or activities of leisure and entertainment which are a part of everyday lives of ordinary people. This can be referred to as popular culture or mass culture. Culture most simply can be understood as the shared values of a group. In the humanities and social sciences, culture has also been seen as a way of life. With the rise of social media, a change in the way of life of people has been witnessed, with changing cultural practices from traditional to modern and now even more global, and hence these changes are reflected through language usage. Now let's look at language. Language represents the ideas that explain the social construction of reality. A common definition of language is the body of words and systems common to people who are of the same community or nation, the same geographical area or the same cultural traditions. However, more recently, language is seen to be more than just a communication system restricted to a group of people. Language is seen as a signifying practice. In this section, an attempt is made to understand questions such as how language is seen as a signifying practice and what it signifies. The further question that is interrogated is what are the critical concepts to be analyzed to explain its operations. It is important to understand the operations of language and its various dimensions such as the way we use language, the poetics or the semiotics of language, and the most important aspect of language, which is the discursive approach to language. The discursive aspect of language refers to the politics or the historical aspects of language, in other words, the effects of language. The comprehensive way for understanding language is through the very concept of semiotics and discursive. In both the semiotics and discursive approaches to understand, there are important differences. Semiotics concerns itself with how meaning is produced in language, and it is concerned with the poetics of language. Discursive is the consequences and effects of language, to be more specific, its implications. Discursive is the impact or politics of representation, while semiotics is simply the poetics to understand how meanings are produced. The discursive approach is concerned with not only how language produces meaning, but with discourses connected with the power that regulates conduct, constructs identities and defines how things should be represented or thought about. It emphasizes the regimes of power or the historical specificity of power constructs in which it is produced. This may also be referred to as discursive turn in the social sciences and cultural studies. There are many philosophers who are attached to this school of thought, such as Foucault, Gramsci, Adorno, Hall, etc. So the key figures of language and linguistic theory, such as Ferdinand de Saussure and Levi-Strauss, argue that language has the power to convey meanings within the underlying structures of cultural systems. They emphasize the role of language in shaping the way people think. This approach is also called structural linguistics or structuralism. In the study of language and culture, it is incomplete to understand language without this approach. According to this theory, language represents ideas, objects and people, and hence can be regarded as a symbolic system. According to the structural linguistic theory, language is a system of codifying practices that is structured by the rules of society. Language in this sense is a signifying practice and can be understood by analyzing the relationship between different elements. According to Saussure, signs are the basic elements of language or linguistics, which comprise of two aspects, which is the signifier and the signified. Further, he shows that language is a way of signifying a meaning through the signifier and the signified. It is a medium for the representation of an object, event or people which has been given meaning through cultural practices and shared meanings. He emphasizes the aspect of how you give meaning to a certain object, people or event through different ways of communicating. The different ways of communicating can be seen as working like language. If one was to understand how language works, then Hall, Stuart Hall, who's stalwart, shows us the way in which language works. He says that language can be understood as systems of representation. He argues that language is essentially a signifying practice and a representational system. A representational system which functions in a certain way of making meaning can be seen as working like language. So, for example, photography can be seen as a representational system. Exhibitions and displays in museums can be analyzed like language since objects produce meanings. Music is like language. It uses feelings and ideas that produce meanings. The illustration of a football match where people might go with their bodies and face painted can be seen as working like language, which gives meaning to belonging to a particular culture or community. These are called signifying practices. Without it, one would not be able to make sense of the life world, identities. Production of meaning and circulation takes place through language and culture. To understand language as a representational system, three theoretical models can be analyzed. First, concerning Saussure's relational theory, which is that language exists in binaries such as black and white, which signify the difference between black and white. Saussure argues that meaning is relational. The difference between black and white is what signifies and carries meaning. We know what is to be British, not simply because of characteristics of nationality, but also how it marks a difference from being non-British. So, British means not German, not American, not Jamaican. Further adding to Derrida's analysis to this theory of binary oppositions can be thought by discussing that they can be charged with being reductionist and oversimplified in their rigid two-part structure, but the power aspect also reflects something, that is, there are very few neutral binaries. Power is relational. He writes that there are two poles of power, but the balance of power is lopsided in relational sense when we say white, black, or masculine, feminine, man, woman, upper class, lower class, British, alien. These are relational categories which reflect strong power dynamics. Second, in the theories of language, much like the first is the theory given by Mikhail Bakhtin. Bakhtin analyzes language through how he understands difference and how construction happens of meaning and dialogue. In 1940s, Bakhtin studied and analyzed language much like Saussureans as a system that is objective but different in the way that it understands dialogue and how it takes place between two or more actors. He argues that it is through this dialogue that meaning is produced. The production of meanings takes place through give and take and through an exchange. And the third model of language concerns the anthropological context. The ideas of Mary Douglas, for example, who incorporates the classical work of Emile Durkheim and Levi-Strauss based on systems, more specifically symbolic systems that demonstrate how social groups give meanings by organizing and ordering things through classificatory systems. Levi-Strauss showed that giving meaning is like dividing things into groups. Having binary oppositions are important for classificatory systems because it conveys a well-defined difference between things to classify them in an orderly fashion. In this context, Strauss gives an example of food, which can be divided into categories of two groups like raw and cooked. Food categories may be divided into groups of starters, main course or desserts. Food can be divided into categories of fruits and vegetables. During cultural celebrations, these categories provide meaning. This is how meanings are given and how difference becomes fundamental. The symbolic boundary keeps categories pure and gives culture its meaning and identity. But this gets unsettled when things do not stay in their right place. It is like breaking unwritten codes because what matters is the place. Such as, for example, how dirt is acceptable in the garden but not in a bedroom. It is through this analogy we can understand how meanings are produced by social actors through language and representational systems. Now let's come to the third part, which is on culture. Culture can be defined in a variety of ways. Anthropologists have defined it as a set of beliefs, shared values, customs and rituals. Hall argues that culture is not simply a set of things, but a set of practices. He shows how the cultural turn in humanities and social sciences, more specifically in cultural studies and sociology of culture, has emphasized the aspect of meaning in the study of culture. Culture refers to the production and exchange of meanings, but it is the giving and the taking of meaning that is to be emphasized between members of society. The most important thing in studying culture is the aspect of cultural practices. It is the actors participating in a cultural system that gives meaning to people, objects, and events. Things do not have meaning in themselves or have any one fixed unchanging meaning. It is the actors who give meaning. It is how we use objects or things or how we think and feel about those objects or things or people that we use language and represent it by giving meanings to culture. We also give meaning to people, objects and events through the framework of interpretation. The meaning is given through how we interpret and integrate them into our cultural systems and practices. Cultural practices are those which are not genetically encoded. They are meaningfully interpreted by social groups. Culture is the human element that separates life from being defined based on merely biological aspects. It is the social element. Further, what is relevant is to understand where meanings are produced. Hall, very interestingly, in 1997 says, meanings are produced at different sites and circulated through practices or processes called the cultural circuit. Meaning is also what gives a sense of identity to understand with whom we belong and who we are. In short, it maintains identity. Meaning is produced and exchanged in every social interaction. Hall shows that an important site of culture is media, where it is also produced in a variety of ways in global communication with technologies that are complex and circulate the meanings between different cultures at an extraordinarily large scale. Meaning further is produced when we express ourselves and consume cultural things and incorporate them into our everyday lives and give them value. Meanings organize our practices and set norms, conventions and rules. It governs and orders our social life. Those who govern and seek to regulate people's ideas and their conduct also become a site where meanings are created and produced. Therefore, meanings arise in our cultural circuit. Now let's come to the next part of a discussion, which is on media. The terms media and medium are interchangeable. The term media refers to a wide range of technologies, genres, channels, forms and products. Media can be viewed as a channel or conduit for transmission of any kind of communication. Electronic media, print, television, oral, tangible and multimedia are some examples of media. Further, multimedia can be made up of a variety of media types and can be a combination of a few forms like print, television and electronic, which together combine to formulate multimedia. Moreover, many types of media are considered popular and known as mass media. The most popular ones could be radio, television, newspapers, films, magazines and electronic media. More recently, media is used as a singular collective which represents all forms and categories. Further, within media, various kinds of cultural specific categorizations of communication can also exist, such as stories, songs, conversations, dialogues, etc. Cultural specific can refer to local folklore, sacred scriptures, myths and legends that find their way into language and linguistic codes within media. Such cultural specific references can be made through photographs, images, paintings, recorded music, videos, comic books, pamphlets, leaflets and even graffiti. These mediums have also been recently recognized within the discourse of indigenous media. To understand media, it is important to understand its role. First, it plays an important role in creating language structures. By giving value and exposure to distinct language cultures, codes, linguistic varieties and discourse styles, media plays a significant role in the political economy of language. It is possible to argue that media is an important venue for the creation of language ideologies. Incorporating specific linguistic codes, for example, into national media can legitimize power by establishing social, political and economic dominance over social and ethnic groups. This can have an impact on the representation of social groups within public sphere. Second, and related to this because of its wide reach, the media is a key trigger for language socialization and language change. Most recently, there has been a rise in the arena of inclusive language. This has also led to linguistic innovations within popular media and social media. Further, and popular cultures have been influenced by the circulation of new sets of keywords, phrases and formulations. Third, language use is often required for media to distinguish social identities and operate as platforms for collective engagement and participation. Race, class and gender, even ethnicity, are constructed with a language as a way of signifying the practice of social identities. These may be culturally constructed through language styles and codes. Moreover, pronoun choices are crucial in this aspect of social identities within language as well. Further, in the context of English broadcasting, sociolinguistics recognizes that regional dialects and their translations can affect definitions, especially if they are being targeted at an audience. Fourth, there is a lot of research being done on connections between intertextual relations in media. Among the subjects that are growing in media research are the transformation of verbal art into electronic technologies, the transfer of classic media conventions into new media genres like digital technologies and global spread of specific language and communication genres. So, the importance of language in media has a significant impact on how relevant media is for culture in each of these fields. Now, let us come to this connection between language, media and popular culture, and this is an important connection. Language and popular culture, with especially the rise of social media, has effectively changed the way people think and their way of life, and the ways of life have changed from traditional cultural practices and representations to modern practices, which can also be increasingly global. There is also a growing body of popular culture. Increasingly, these changes are reflected in language and representation. As mentioned above, there is a discourse on inclusive language, and secondly, the space for the explanation of identity and especially gender identity, ethnic identity, which is expressed virtually through images, is expanding. Globalization has also played an important role in bringing this change with global platforms like Facebook, like Instagram, and so many other of these social networking spaces where people express their everyday life and experiences. The new social media platforms are offering people the space to explore their identity and their ideas through the representation of their everyday life, through stories like use of different filters, reels, photographs, and these are important places where popular cultures exist. Third, this is also providing media users the space to talk about contemporary issues, about their contemporary feelings. Many social movements and campaigns are using language of popular media. Movements like Me Too and many other issues are highlighted through social media. These are also taking the shape of popular culture, being vocal about issues such as those of climate change, for example, or global warming, and other environmental issues linked to sustainable models are also gaining impetus through social media. For example, Greta Thunberg became a popular voice through social media platforms. It is critical to consider the context for the advancement of popular culture in the wider context of language and culture. The question still is, do the ideas describe the difficulties or possibilities for the rapid diffusion of popular culture? Now, with this discussion, let us find a few points of our conclusion. So, we have in this module elaborated on language through the theory of structural linguistics. It highlighted how language has the power to convey meanings within the underlying structures of cultural systems. It outlined the role of language in shaping the way people think. It further delved into the crucial question of whether language influences culture or is culture influenced by language. It is also important to think about questions of linguistic transformations which occur, and we also talked about those aspects of language. To understand the important connection between language and culture, this module drew an interlinkage between language, culture and media so that a framework could be established to understand popular culture or what is popular culture. Further, it pointed at the meaning of culture as not simply a set of things but a set of practices. It highlighted the role of media in the making of language and culture. A discussion was made on how language structures are referred to when describing lived experiences on media, especially social media, with the incorporation of words, images, linguistic styles, ready-made formulations, phrases and photographs that combine to form language. More importantly, this module also discussed the underlying power structures that influence language, culture and media. In the interlinkage, it is also discussed the role of media in becoming a powerful tool for bringing in change and transformation. Hence, a close connection was drawn between language, media and popular culture. It also touched upon the discourse on inclusive language, popular culture and feminism to show the impact of contemporary movements and social media campaigns that are making their way into popular culture and practices. It showed how social media platforms emerging in contemporary global period like Instagram, Facebook, etc. are widening the scope for people in contributing to the everyday making of culture. With this, we come to the conclusion of the module on language, media and popular culture. I hope that you all engaged and learned from this module, and I look forward to engaging with you all into the future. Thank you.